Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. It's Mitch from Smart PE, and today I'm going to be looking at a smarter way to learn or revise the topic of energy use, diet, nutrition and hydration. But first of all, we need to understand what a balanced diet is and why is it so important. So a balanced diet will help an athlete maintain an optimum weight, and obviously that is very important, but also it will ensure that the athlete has essential nutrients that they need in order to reduce the risk of certain illnesses, and that could even be something like the common cold. Now, a balanced diet is made up of carbohydrate, fat and protein, and most people would eat the percentages that are on the slide now. So typically a normal person would have 55 to 60% of their diet would be carbohydrate based, 25 to 30% would be fats, and 15 to 20% would be protein. Now, obviously it depends on the sport that you take part in or the position within a particular team. That will dictate how those percentages might change. So for example, if I was a sprinter or a weightlifter, then I'm going to be eating more protein than 15 to 20%. If I am an endurance athlete, let's say a triathlete for example, I'm going to be eating more than 55 to 60% carbohydrate. So these numbers will kind of fluctuate and change depending upon the sport or position that you play. Okay, we then have a keyword called a macronutrient. This is what we've already seen. This is what should make up the bulk of our plate and our diet. So macronutrient, an example is a carbohydrate, fats and proteins. Now carbohydrate could be potato, fats could be cheese, and protein could be eggs. Now the role of a carbohydrate is to provide energy for aerobic and anaerobic activity. So let's imagine if you were a long distance runner, obviously it's going to provide you energy throughout your race, and that's really important just to make sure you have enough energy for the duration of the race, which will allow you to run at a faster pace for longer. Now, if an endurance athlete decided not to have a diet rich in carbohydrate, then obviously they're not going to have enough energy to sustain their race pace throughout the race. So they're definitely going to fatigue and tire quickly. Now the role of a fat, as I've already said, an example might be cheeses for example. Fats also provide energy, in particular an energy which is released really slowly. So let's imagine if you were an endurance athlete. That slow release of energy is really important for the duration of your race, so you don't get tired too quickly. Now, I guess on the flip side of that, you don't want to eat too much fat, particularly saturated fat, as if you eat too much saturated fat, you might be more susceptible to coronary heart disease or diabetes, and that's going to be detrimental to your performance as it will make you stop training. You will not be able to perform or train at a high level. And finally, we have protein. Protein is designed for muscle growth and repair. And again, if I was a weightlifter, competing and taking part in weight or resistance training, then actually that protein is really important to repair some microscopic tears in the muscle, and that protein will allow me to recover faster. Now again, if I decided not to eat enough protein as a weightlifter, then that's going to be no good. My muscles are not going to heal, they're not going to repair, they're not going to grow as quickly. So then I'm more likely to become injured. So protein is really important as well. Okay, we now need to look at micronutrients. These are what you would eat again, but typically in smaller quantities. So minerals and vitamins, water and fibre. Now a mineral and a vitamin will come from things like fresh fruits, very similar to fibre. Fibre also comes from kind of fresh fruits, and we have water. Now water can obviously be just what you drink, or it might come from certain foods like cucumber. So let's look at minerals and vitamins first. A classic mineral that we know is calcium, and that comes in the form of milk and is important for keeping our bones and teeth strong. And then we have vitamin D. Vitamin D actually comes from sunlight, and vitamin D actually allowed our body to absorb the calcium. So both of those things work really closely together. Now, let's look at how important that is for a particular performer. Let's take a gymnast, for example. Calcium and vitamin D are really important to make our bones nice and strong. Now, obviously, if my bones are strong, then there's going to be a reduced risk of me fracturing a bone during a particular gymnastics routine. Now, if we kind of flip that and kind of look at the other side, if we weren't to eat enough calcium and get enough vitamin D, then we actually have an increased risk of osteoporosis, which is a disease that affects our bones and makes our bones really brittle. So again, this would have an impact because I'm more likely to fracture a bone, which would potentially obviously make me have to stop training as a result. Okay, we then have water. Water is really important for preventing dehydration. And again, if you imagine you're in a hot, warm environment, you actually sweat a lot, and it's that sweating which cools your body down. Now, if you don't replace that fluid that is lost through sweat, then obviously you become dehydrated, which is going to have a real negative effect on your performance. If you don't eat and either eat through like cucumber or lettuce or drink enough water, then it's going to cause your muscles to cramp. It's going to cause you to fatigue early, and obviously that is just going to slow you down. And finally, we have fiber. Fiber aids the digestive system. Now let's take a look at some kind of these triathletes, the Brownie brothers. You know, they might eat in a typical day maybe 5,000–6,000 calories. So fiber will help their digestive system extract and withdraw all the nutrients from all that food. So they're going to have a real good supply of energy and be fit and healthy and well to be able to train at high intensity, which obviously is really important. Okay, we now move on to a particular method that you can do to basically try and trick your body to store as much carbohydrate as possible. And we call this carbohydrate loading. And there are kind of two simple steps to it really. First of all, this is used by endurance athletes. So if you think of a cross-country runner, a triathlete, a long-distance swimmer, these guys would be people that would consider carbohydrate loading. So the first thing you do, 3 to 5 days before your event or competition, you increase the amount of carbohydrates that you eat. You then look into taper. Taper just means to kind of reduce the amount of training that you do. Now it's nice and straightforward. The reason why we do this is glycogen stores, which is just a stored form of carbohydrate. Glycogen stores in the muscle increase. Now glycogen can also be stored in the liver as well. So if this energy store within muscle is increased, then that's obviously going to have a profound effect on our performance. So if I were to be in a long distance event, I'm going to be able to produce energy for longer, and I'm going to be able to perform at a higher intensity for longer, hopefully delaying fatigue. Now again, think of an endurance athlete. It's often a long duration type of event. Being able to work at a higher intensity for longer is obviously really beneficial. The other thing we need to look at is when should a power athlete, in terms of timing, when should they actually look to take protein on? Now, we know that protein has kind of muscle growth and repair type effects. That's going to be really important. It's really simple. Immediately after exercise, a power athlete should be looking to take protein. Now that's going to repair those micro tears in the muscle. That's going to help you to recover faster, and that's going to allow you to make more gains. You're going to be able to return to the gym the next day or maybe the day after and still train really hard. Your muscles are going to adapt. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get more powerful, and that protein helps with the healing of those muscles that were used in the previous session. Okay, we then move on to factors that affect optimum weight. Now, optimum weight is just the ideal weight for your sport or for your position. So here we have a sumo wrestler and a jockey. Typically, a sumo wrestler is going to be heavier than a jockey because that's obviously really important. A sumo wrestler is looking to be pushed out of a particular ring, and actually to have some additional mass or weight is really important for that. Whereas a jockey needs to be light so they're not weighing the horse down so the horse can travel at top speed. Now there are 4 factors that affect someone's optimum weight: bone structure, height, gender, and muscle girth. Now bone structure, if your bones are more dense, like a gymnast for example, typically you are going to weigh more than somebody whose bone structure is less than yours or whose bones are less dense than yours. Height, typically taller people will weigh more than shorter people. Gender, males typically weigh more than females. and muscle girth. Muscle weighs more than fat, it's more dense than fat. So again, somebody more muscular is going to weigh more than somebody who's less muscular. Now again, as I've already mentioned, optimum weight varies depending upon the sport or your role within a team. So here we have a long distance runner and we have a power or sprint type event. Now obviously this long distance runner needs to be lighter, so there's less weight for them to carry. Now let's imagine if they weren't following a balanced diet accurately. If the athlete had eaten too much fat, they would have to carry extra weight, which would obviously slow them down. Now, if they're being slowed down by additional weight, then it's obviously going to make them tire more quickly. So that's why a long distance runner ideally needs to be really light and lean. Now, if we compare that to a sprinter needs to be a bit heavier so they can apply more muscular force. We know that kind of sprint events are all about power, and actually having a large muscle mass will allow you to apply more force. So hopefully you're going to be faster, you're going to be more powerful, you're going to be stronger, and that's really important. Okay, within this topic we now need to consider this idea of energy balance. Now this is really straightforward. This first image explains it quite nicely. If you eat more calories than you burn off, you are going to gain weight, and you might be susceptible to certain diseases such as diabetes, coronary heart disease, or obesity. Now obviously if you were diabetic or had some sort of heart condition or were obese, then obviously this is going to affect something like your cardiovascular endurance. You're not going to be able to train. You might even start to experience reversibility because you're having to stop training. If we compare that to somebody of a balanced weight, which we would consider being healthy, this is when the amount of calories that you eat and the amount of calories that you burn off in a typical day balance each other off. So again, your weight should stay pretty consistent. And finally, we have weight loss. If the amount of calories that you burn is greater than the amount of calories that you eat, you're likely to lose weight. Now, we do have certain conditions and illnesses that are related with this, and anorexia is one of those. Obviously, anorexia affects you physically, but also emotionally and mentally as well. Okay, and then finally, we need to look at hydration with this particular topic. Now, hydration is really important. So if we look first of all at the negative side, the left-hand side, being dehydrated increases your body temperature, increases blood viscosity. Viscosity just means how thick your blood is. And finally, you are more likely to suffer from cramp and fatigue. Now, obviously, any one of those things, if that's happening to you, it's going to have a real detrimental negative effect on your performance. You're going to have to stop or you're going to have to slow down. Now, if we kind of flip that and look at the benefit of staying hydrated, we know that water, fluid, is going to allow us to sweat, and it's going to allow us to cool our body down just to make sure we don't overheat, and that's really important. We also know that being hydrated puts less strain on the heart. Oxygenated blood is able to flow through the vascular system and the heart much more easily. If you imagine water trying to flow through, let's say, a garden hose, if we compare that to treacle or honey, something a lot thicker, it's obviously going to be flowing much more freely if the consistency and thickness is less. So oxygenated blood is going to be able to get to working muscles much more easily. So there is going to be a reduced strain on the heart. And finally, being hydrated massively improves performance. You're not hopefully going to be getting things like fatigue and cramp as early, as your body is going to be really efficient at dealing with the exercise that you're doing. So being hydrated is really important. Now, hopefully this has sort of summarized the topic area for you. And if you have sort of scanned this QR code to help you answer the extended question, then hopefully you're going to be able to pick out some of the relevant information and apply it to that question. Good luck.